Films are born in the cradles of technology. Therefore, whatever advancement which happens in the field of technology reflects in the way films find their presence and relevance in the world. Similarly, films are born in the cradles of human imagination. Therefore, films do impact the shape of the world because they carry the power to shape the imagination of us humans who have the power to shape the world. Today, in this August gathering, I would like to share some of my views and insights and experiences from behind the scenes of our topic of the rise of OTT. A film is an audiovisual medium of mass communication. Films have roughly a history of about 130 years, whereas OTT, which is over the top, is even more recent. OTTs are technology-enabled platforms that are designed to deliver audiovisual content, bringing the media assets into the comforts and confines of individuals, spread across boundaries of geography and time. Today, in our conversation, I would like to use the term film, with your permission, to refer to a wide range of audiovisual content, irrespective of their format or their origins or their presentability. A film can be 30 seconds long, a film can be 3 hours long. So irrespective of the format of what the content is, I would use the term film, including the content which gets delivered through OTTs. I feel really fortunate to be part of the team which made Panchayat. It is a web series in Hindi. It is one of the recent success stories, that have kind of occupied the OTT space in India. In 2018, when we started to prepare for Panchayat, we hardly had any idea. We had absolutely no inkling that such a simplistic slice of life, everyday story coming from the rural North India will find resonance, it will find acceptance in the audiences who are spread across the world. Audiences spread across languages, across regions, across cultures. So that is the power which OTT brings to a content. When we see a film, when we experience a film, we see it through our eyes, we hear the sound through our ears, and what we observe essentially reaches in our brains. So this term behind the scenes, which has actually intrigued me a lot for our topic today, I would like to stretch that word behind in a few ways, and I feel it will be important to look at the phrase behind the word in some of these ways. So when we say that, okay, the content goes somewhere in our brains, I would like to start with looking behind in our body. And that is where I would like to bring forth two terminologies which I find have some very vital insights about behind the scenes. The first term comes from the field of biology. It is called mirror neurons. Although I am not a subject expert, but in my simple understanding, mirror neurons are found in our brains and they influence us to imitate an action that we observe being performed by another individual, whether it is in real life or on screen. So oftentimes we imitate actions that we watch unknowingly or inadvertently. The second term comes from the field of psychology. It is called suspension of disbelief. Again, in my simple understanding, human beings are highly likely to avoid their faculties of rational thinking, of analytical thinking, and accept events, actions, objects that appear in front of them for the sake of enjoying a narrative or enjoying a fictional work. So, suspense of disbelief is also something very important that is going inside our systems when we are watching a work of fiction through OTTs, through films. Now, with the rise of OTTs, what I would expect is that we will be surrounded by numerous screens all around us. Here itself, I can see so many screens surrounding us. And the borders of the screen and the real world will dissolve. So, as a viewer, as an audience, it will become seamless for us to observe events occurring in the real world and occurring on the screen, not knowing very clearly as to what is happening in the real world and what is happening on screen. And that brings to me a word of caution. Because with the rise of OTTs, I would expect a rise in numbers and numbers and numbers of people who would be imitating what they are watching on screen, embracing them under the influence of mirror neurons and suspension of disbelief, which means that in real world, we are likely to see actions which are actually part of a fiction produced for distribution over OTT content. This observation can be tricky, it can be trivial, it can be humorous, or it can also have some elements of caution. Moving on, I would say that, okay, now let's go behind in time, because behind in time is also very much behind in our scenes. So long, long ago, there lived a king called Amar Shakti. He had 3 sons who were extremely unruly, very, very uncultured, and very, very ill-mannered. Concerned about their future and concerned as a parent, King Amar Shakti approached a very wise guru and requested him as to how these 3 princes could be educated. The guru observed the 3 children for some time, and looking at the scope of the challenge, the guru devised a very, very innovative, out-of-the-box approach to educate them. What the guru did is that he framed a series of fictional stories that had talking animals, but had certain quality of moral education and the other parts of education that would lead someone to grow into possibly a more dignified, responsible individual. So what the guru did is that he engaged with the children in a very, very entertaining, storytelling kind of a way. And in just about 6 months, enjoying those stories, the 3 princes, they transformed into noblemen. The guru is very well-known Vishnu Sharma, and the series of stories that I am referring to are very famous Panchatantra. Incidentally, Panchatantra is the most translated work of literature from India. Now, borrowing from this insight from behind the scenes in time, I would once again sound my words of caution Because somewhere we need to be very, very alert and very aware about how we entertain ourselves. Because what is happening, what we have seen happen, is that under the surface of entertainment, there is a very solid education that is being passed on, especially of the moral kind. So now, with the rise of OTTs, when our stories, when our content is reaching innumerable people, across the boundaries of geographies and time, I feel there can be a massive rise in number of people who are drawing their share of education under the pretext of what they imagine is entertainment. Entertainment is eventually delivering education. That, again, can be very tricky. It can be very trivial, or it can be full of cautions. I would now like to go behind in space. As an example, if I say, in this space, in this scene right now, that we are here inside this auditorium, we are all surrounded by innumerable waves, electromagnetic waves, radiations, so many things, which are actually right now within the scene. They are very much part of the scene, but they are invisible. To give you another illustration, I wonder how many of us here can actually see a wireless transmitter which I am carrying, right? I am carrying the wireless transmitter here. This is the wireless transmitter, right? This is very much within the scene. It's part of the scene. In fact, this scene right now is being made possible because of the transmitter which I am carrying here. But it is not being seen through our eyes here, because somewhere it is behind the scene. Here, the point that I'm trying to underline is that oftentimes within the scene and behind the scene not only coexist, but they are also necessary for each other. And that is where I'm trying to remove this psychological boundary that within the scene is something else and outside the scene is something else. No, there are many, many, many instances where within the scene and behind the scene and the scene are one and the same. To work further on this thought, I would say that we surround ourselves with air all the time. That is required for our survival, because the air contains oxygen, and it is a healthy oxygen which gives us a good health, right? If the air turns polluted, if the quality of oxygen goes bad, there is every possibility that we may start feeling breathless. We may start feeling suffocated. Now, when I transport this thought onto our topic of rise of OTTs, I would say that media is like air, content is like oxygen, and OTTs are like wind channels, because it is the role of the wind channels that somewhere circulate throughout our entire geography and keep the air breathable, keep the oxygen healthy, right? So now, when the OTTs will rise, when the OTTs will start reaching people far and wide, which they already are, they are bound to carry the air of our culture, right? What is very, very special, very peculiar about OTTs is that they preserve the content in a digital domain, which remains lossless over a huge span of time. I would say hundreds of years. Which may mean that at the push of an icon, the content that we see today will be exactly the content that somebody will see maybe hundreds of years later, maybe 200 years later. Maybe somebody will watch the content floating somewhere in the space station. Maybe somebody will watch the content possibly in some other planet. What happens is that when the lifespan of something that we create assumes such an enormous scape of time and space, it becomes very, very difficult for an individual or for a group of individuals to objectively and analytically assess whether the quality of oxygen that is being produced will remain breathable or not. Because the quality of oxygen is actually the content that we are creating. This, to my mind, remains one of the most sensitive concerns that I would have when it comes to the overall cultural health that we have, because the cultural health that we have will eventually reflect in the health of our society. We have come through a very, very, very glorious, vast civilization which would have evolved over thousands and thousands of years. You know, for any kind of culture to come in place, it takes thousands of years of evolution, humongous efforts over numerous generations of people, of us, our ancestors, to put a culture in place. However, I feel that to deflect a thriving culture, to derail a thriving culture into a completely unwanted direction, could be comparatively effortless. It could comparatively happen, very, very quickly. Because our culture somewhere is an essential extension of our civilization. It gives me a lot of concerns and questions that I would like to share here. So today, as I close my talk, I would definitely like you to get more engaged, to think deeper into this entire aspect of how the rise in OTTs will eventually reflect into how our civilization, how our cultures progress. I feel in India, we are truly blessed and really, really fortunate to have a civilization which is glorious, it is ancient, and it is a living civilization. I would really thank you for your time.